Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to And She Thrived, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. Today, I have with me Jamil Popatia, and he is a non-violent communication trainer. And I'm delighted to have him here with us. Assalamu alaikum, Jamil. How are you?
Assalamu wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sumaya, I'm doing well. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much for honoring us today. I'm just going to start with just telling our community a bit about you, if that's all right.
Sure.
Okay, so let me get to it over here. Jamil is a certified trainer in Vancouver, British Columbia. His daily work centers on his role as a family clinical counselor, but finds himself more inclined to matters of the spirit, and therefore, what interests him most is how nonviolent communication contributes to matters of spirituality. For Jamil, the needs most alive for him at any given moment are that of meaning and or purpose. He has been exploring through his inner journey how religion and spirituality intersect with compassionate communication. It is this area where Jamil does most of his work in nonviolent communication, which we will refer to as NVC. Jamil's passion also lies in counseling men via his coaching program, Dignified Dialogue. Welcome, Jamil.
Thank you for having me, Sumaya. Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so perhaps our audience is wondering, why in heaven's name do we have something here on nonviolent communication on a platform for divorced Muslim women? So I'd like to just talk a bit about that, about what motivated me to have this conversation. Is that for me personally, I was introduced to NVC about a year ago. And I remember that when I first witnessed the demo of how people could apply not the word, I know you don't like the word tools, but maybe what would be a better word for people when people apply the principles of NVC, or what would you say, apply the
maybe the process
okay, the process of NVC.
Yeah.
I remember when I was watching, I felt like I was witnessing a symphony, in the sense of the authenticity of it, but it's the elegance of being able to communicate effectively. So I think that more people than not struggle with communication, unless you've been trained formally in that. And we often continue the patterns of communication that we were exposed to growing up since we were children. And what I really appreciate tremendously about NVC is how it's not merely being polite, it's really becoming self-aware and connecting with the body and recognizing, what is it that I need right now? Why am I upset? Is there something within me that is misaligned? So you have to become very introspective in a way. At the same time, it's becoming more perceptive and connected to the person in front of you. Yeah. And then it's finding the right words within how to express oneself in which you feel at ease, that you've done justice to this. And when that is executed effectively, for me, it's just so absolutely inspiring, and it has motivated me personally to embark upon this journey further. So I am really, really grateful that you are here with us to tell our community more about this. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Jamil. If you could, is anything if you would like to say about it? Okay.
I just want to say that it's a long journey, the journey of exploring nonviolent communication for me. I'll tell you a little bit about it at some point, but it's not a very well-known field, nor is it very interesting. It's also not very lucrative for those of us who use it in our professions. So I assume that there's going to be a significant number of your viewers and listeners that this may be entirely new to them. And so I'm going to speak with that assumption that this is new to most of your listeners and viewers.
Okay, great. So as an introduction, if you could explain to the person who doesn't have a clue about this, has never read the book, what is NVC?
Yeah, so nonviolent communication, it's based on the book that is, it's been translated now into millions of, it's in the hands of millions of people around the world into several languages. The late Marshall B. Rosenberg wrote the book, Nonviolent Communication, A Language of Life. It is a terribly simple book if you're to read it. Anyone has access to it, really age 15 and up, possibly. And in that book, he talks a lot about the importance of the 4 components of nonviolent communication, which we may get into: observations, feelings, needs, and requests. And he compares and contrasts those things with the opposites. So observations versus evaluations, and knowing the difference. So it's very simple in its intellectually, it's very simple to grasp what nonviolent communication is. Practically speaking, it is very difficult to implement it, because it requires an inner work before you're able to speak in a nonviolent way. And nonviolent does not mean the absence of physical violence only. It's more complex than that, and it's deeper than that. So essentially, in a 1-sentence summary, nonviolent communication, also known as compassionate communication, is a process of connecting with others, connecting with yourself, and for the purposes of people of faith, connecting with one's creator. So it's a tripartite division that way for me. The third connection I just talked about, connection with God, is not necessarily talked about in nonviolent communication circles. It's something that I add to it because it's very important to me as a person of faith, as I know it is to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the details of, those are the bare bones. And then there's so much to unpack with regards to how it's done. It's more a practice than it is intellectual theory. The first thing I noticed in my studies in nonviolent communication is there wasn't that much in the way of studies, actually. It's more an experience, practice, immersing myself in it, and then working through the conundrums, which I'm sure we're going to get into. For myself, being a practicing devout Muslim, I hope, and Islam being probably the most moralistic and, traditional of Abrahamic faiths, and comparing and contrasting that with a very secular paradigm of nonviolent communication, which is quite flat. How do I bring these two together for myself and for others? And it's been a challenge. The conundrums have lasted a long time, but alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for the fact that I've gotten to where I am now, and there's more work to do.
Okay, so tell us more. We need to go into more detail here for people who do not understand what are the feelings, what are the needs.
Yeah.
If you could run through that, and then those 4 different divisions you mentioned, it would be valuable to go through that. Mm-hmm. And I mean, just that the aim here is that when the person leaves, they feel, wow, like I've got a solid picture of what NVC is, and I can go home right now and start to apply these certain principles pretty much immediately. Okay,
well, let's go first with how we do things in the way of Islam, which is, what about the intention? Because NVC, or compassionate communication, is a choiceful thing. There's a choice. It doesn't have to be that one adheres to it at every given moment. I certainly don't. However, nonviolent communication is a practice process, if you like, toolbox, toolkit. I don't like that term too much, of something to be used or experienced when connection is important to you. You think of the father-son, mother-daughter, mother-son, husband-wife, perhaps even colleague, spiritual teacher and student, etc. Whenever connection is important, and there are a few times in life, I'm sure you'd agree, where connection isn't that important. It's more efficiency maybe, or productivity, or something like that, or it could be that connection isn't important. But when connection is important, then nonviolent communication is a great process, because it's a balancing game between 2 ways of showing up: being empathic. And though I realize the word empathy has been weaponized as of in recent times, empathy is still priceless. It is still a beautiful thing when you can really feel someone's feelings, someone's needs, and also be felt, be understood, and someone understands your feelings and needs. And I'll go into what NVC says about feelings and needs in a second. That's a tremendous feeling of being heard, seen, accepted, and feeling like you matter. On the other side of that scale with empathy is authenticity, honest expression. And so oftentimes we're in this conundrum or this mutually exclusive game of, should I be empathic or should I be honest and authentic, as if they are two different tracks. You can do both.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what NVC seeks to balance, the balance between those two, authenticity and empathy. How does it do that? Or how do we promote that delicate balance? Through the knowing, understanding, and distinguishing between certain key distinctions in NVC. I mentioned the first component of NVC is observations. Now, if I ask you, Sumaya, observation, what would you compare and contrast observation with? In other words, you observe with your senses, your eyes, your hearing, and what is that compared and contrast with, do you think? What could it be?
So you're saying what observation is, being from the outside and observing something as
Yes.
as an outside bystander.
Even inside you,
observing
or
inside.
within an interaction, let's say between you and a friend, you and a child, you and a colleague. Something has happened, an interaction has occurred between you and someone else.
Well, I would say that the opposite of observation is unawareness, heedlessness.
Right. So, yeah, awareness is part of it, but we often compare and contrast observation with evaluation. Let me give you an example that
where you're attributing like some kind of a judgment to it.
Right, exactly that. That's a buzzword there. The judgment or assessment, where you're actually not pulling back from labels. And so the example I gave, I did a workshop on anxiety and depression, and we were talking about this aspect of observation. And I said, in the conference room, I said, look outside, and we're looking on a busy street outside. And I said, what if you were to see a mother and a son? They're at the crosswalk, and all you see is the mother pulling the son or pulling the child aggressively from the hoodie or from the jacket, and it almost chokes him, just yanking him back. That's what you see. What's going on? How are you going to describe this? Several people said, that's an act of abuse. That I saw the mom abuse the son. I saw the child get assaulted by the parent, etc., etc. All of them in this particular workshop, all of them were evaluations of the mother's behavior. And I said, if you peel away all the evaluations, all the assessments, and all the labels you're giving to this mother, what happened? An adult woman, presumably mother of this child, presumably, we don't know for sure, grabbed the jacket of the child and yanked the child back, and the child moved back about 3 feet. That's all you could see. And that's all you can do without assuming. That's what we mean by observations. And most of the participants in this workshop, this particular morning, I recall, they had foul words for this woman because they had made an assumption about the intention of her behavior and what she was doing. And they called it all kinds of decorative terms like assault, abuse, child abuse, etc. And I said, and what if we're wrong? What if our evaluations are wrong? And one woman said, what if she was just pulling her child back from crossing the very busy street, and she had to be aggressive about it, using what we call in NVC the protective use of force? And she said, and then I said to her, that's it. That's the point. What if it's that? What if it actually is an act of violence, aggressive violence, punitive act of violence, then that's what it is. But what if it is what you just said? The saving of her child's life, or a child's life, presumably her son, maybe not, then all of our evaluations would be inaccurate. And so that's the pause. Pausing on the assessment and the evaluation and saying, this is what I'm noticing. This is what I'm observing. And in NVC, you're observing first and foremost something in you. And then in an interaction with someone else, something in them. And you can name it. So I'm going to have to, I'm not going to have to. I mean, I choose to disclose something very vulnerable right now. And I'm doing so with an intention. And that intention is, first of all, to share vulnerability, which is difficult for me. And secondly, to name how this works for intrapersonal interaction with myself. Your viewers can have a wonderful laugh when they see this. So I'm dreadfully scared of needles and blood tests. I notice when I go, as I walk up to the nurse to register, etc., I say it to myself. You seem nervous. Why are you sweating? You seem like you're getting hot. Take off your hat or jacket or something. And I talk to myself and I name, I mean, it sounds absolutely insane. All this self-talk is happening and I'm naming what's happening inside of me. I'm naming the feelings and I'm naming what I'm observing. Okay, you look, it feels like you're getting hotter. Like I'm talking to myself. And I know that that's happening. I'm not judging it. Like, you wimp, you son of a, you pathetic, scared, all kinds of labels I could use. I'm not doing that. I'm just saying this is happening. And here's what I'm observing about myself. So there's instead of, I could condemn myself. I could shame myself. I could say, you pathetic, whatever. How can this be such a big deal to you? It's a 30-second thing. And if I pause on that, now I'm doing the observation. How am I going to do this in an interaction? So let's say I'm talking to my son or my daughter or a child, and I notice that maybe they're not listening. It doesn't look like they're paying attention. Instead of saying something to do with a judgment of their values, I might say, and the natural instinct is to say, hey, you're distracted. Can you pay attention? I'm talking to you. You're distracted. Don't look this way or that way. And we offer a whole bunch of instructions. But if I notice something, I notice you keep looking at your screen, your laptop, your phone, or your book, and I'm talking to you, and I want to make sure that I'm understood. And so I love it when we can connect eye to eye, face to face. And I'm not sure if you're hearing the words I'm saying right now, because I keep noticing you looking somewhere else. I'm not calling him anything or her anything. I'm just naming what I notice.
Yes, and I wanted to interject here that you are doing it, but just to highlight for our viewers that what's very important in this work is also tone and the eye contact, right? Because one could say, I'm noticing that you are on your phone.
Yes.
And I can have some kind of condescension in it. So to be like, to soften the tone, right? Just, okay.
Yeah. Well, you can, so here's where people differ, Sumaya, people differ, and it's going to look, not to be too archetypal, this is going to look different between men and women, and it's going to look different between men and women, on top of men and women, people who do this regularly, and those who are in the realm of connecting with people day to day. My work as a counselor means I'm continuously working in this area. It might not be that easy for someone who's not, and I'm not saying it's easy for me. In fact, my nature is very antithetical to slowing down and doing this check-in with people and myself. It's more reactionary. So yeah, you could, the language is not as important as the intention and the inner work. So the language, we can teach that. We can all learn that. In fact, that's the intellectual component of this NVC. The inward part is that the person can sense you're being genuine with them, that you really want to connect with them. And whether your words convey that or not, they can sense it. They can sense it. So even if you say, for like you just said, I'm noticing that you're, in the last 3 minutes, you've looked at your phone about 5 to 10 times. And I'm worried, and that's where we get into feelings about afterwards, that I'm not being heard. And so I want to name that I'm noticing that. That's all. You're not offering a resolution. You're not offering a punitive measure to be put in place. You're just noticing something and you're naming what you're noticing. That's it. So that's observation. This can be done, the way we do it in a lot of training circles is 2 people having a conversation and a third person noticing and naming what they're noticing. Then we bring it to 2 people talking to each other and they're noticing each other in the conversation. This is more challenging when the topic of the conversation is one that can be emotionally charged, let's say. Like it could be something that arouses passion in people. And all of us have that passion. Some express it more than others. Some might be more stoic. Some might be very open and expressive about it. But so that's how we distinguish. That's the first key distinction: observation. And we say versus, but really we mean observation and evaluation. It's not to say evaluation, judgment, assessment is wrong, but to distinguish between the two, such that when you do make an evaluation, that you own it. So here's an example similar to the one I gave you about the workshop. When you let your small child, when you're looking to let him or her cross the street, you're making an evaluation. Is this a safe street for him to cross alone? That's an assessment. And you're owning it. Like, you know what? I don't think it's a great place to cross on your own. Wait till I'm free. I'll cross with you and we'll go to the park, whatever it is. At least you're naming the fact that you're making an evaluation. And then you're owning it. It's not even a big deal. That's not a very emotionally charged, moralistic decision. But it may be something else. And maybe we can talk about more charged examples after. But just to emphasize the point, evaluation, judgment, assessment, all of that, knowing the difference between that and an observation. Then when you actually go through with this exercise, you're doing it by choice, not by habit. We have something called a key distinction between habitual patterns and natural patterns. Habitual patterns are what we're trained with by mom, dad, school, coach, teachers. Those aren't always healthy. And then when we're adults, you and I are adults, we can talk about this. We tend to just fall back into habitual patterns. They're not natural. Because for the children of Adam, it is natural to connect. Sure, there'll be disconnection, but it's natural to connect with the human family. Why not? And things get in the way of that. And most of that is previous experiences that lead us to not trust and to not be confident in our human siblings. So that's just observation versus evaluation. Let me take a pause to offer you an opportunity to ask anything.
No, please go ahead. So
Okay.
This is the first of the 4?
First of 4, you got it. Yeah. The second one is, this one wasn't too new to me when I learned it. The distinction between feelings. So you can substitute the word emotions. So feelings, emotions versus perceptions or indictments. Let me give you an example. It's best with examples. So you may hear people say, you may hear yourself say, or you may even hear me say, I feel really insulted. Now, let me pause for a second and just let you and your viewers decide if they've ever said that. I know I've said that. So can I assume that you've said that?
Yes, absolutely. Would
So
would that be the same as saying I find that very offensive, or is that different?
yes, I mean that's a more clever, highbrow way to say that. So if we limit it to the perceptions, like the words that tend to be verbs where you're the one that's being verbed, right? I feel insulted. I feel disrespected. I feel abandoned. We all know these words. I tend not to say them anymore as much, but I know I did. Abandoned, discouraged. Discouraged is a tricky one. Abandoned, disrespected, insulted. There are lots of them, and they tend to end in ed.
So what are those judgments?
So I'm going to ask you, how is that different if I say, here, let me give you an example. This is in order to understand what we mean by feelings and emotions. If I say to you, you know what? Yes. My spouse was giving me such a hard time, and she's always on the road, let's say, and I really feel so abandoned. Now you're an NVC facilitator, you're experienced in NVC, let's say. How are you going to pick that apart for me and help me to get past the label of abandoned? Because what am I saying? Essentially, what am I saying about my woman? If I say I feel abandoned, what am I saying about her?
She has abandoned you.
Right, exactly that, Sumaya.
Making a
I'm no
judgment.
longer I'm no longer talking about myself. I'm talking about the actions of someone else, not even her feelings. I'm talking about her actions. When I say I feel abandoned, I would translate that to, I think you are a regular abandoner. You abandon me regularly. That's an indictment. That's my perception. And we call those faux feelings because there's some feeling there, but that's not what's being
Inaccurate.
disclosed.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's a lot
So,
of fluff. So how do you translate that? Tell me, Sumaya, how would you translate that to a genuine feeling that doesn't require someone to blame?
well, I think that then one needs to become more tuned to the unmet need within oneself. Is that it? So
Well, first, before that, the easier one is feelings. Needs is
feeling.
very unique to NVC.
Okay, so I wish we could have given a few of the list of feelings and needs. So, because I find that very useful to just see that. Maybe we can
Yeah,
mention that later.
we can talk about, yeah.
So what am I feeling? I am feeling sad.
Okay.
I feel alone.
Right. Right.
I feel unsupported.
Well, so that requires someone. That requires someone.
Oh, so that's not accurate. That's not right.
I wouldn't, I mean, I'm not going to, I would say yes and.
Okay.
So you might feel supported, unsupported, but that's not deep enough because it still requires someone to be a supporter. So the key is that it does not require someone to blame. So when I say abandoned,
So when you say I feel sad, it's not blaming anyone. It's an emotion that's
exactly, you're
generated from.
taking responsibility for your feelings. You understand what I'm saying? You're taking responsibility. So when I say all those things you said, let's say I'm in that predicament.
I feel disappointed. You can say I feel disappointed.
Sure. And that there's we relearn vocabulary of feelings in NVC. We learn them in a very rich way with a long, non-exhaustive list that we're given over and over again. Be familiar with them, be familiar with them. And I think it's helped a lot for me because what do I grow up with? I grew up with sad, mad, glad, angry, and that's about it. Right? Those are the ones. And you can't even have them all. Some are worth suppressing by your parents or a coach or whatever. So if I use the example I gave you, I feel abandoned. You translated it very well. Well, maybe you feel sad, lonely, alone. Let me ask you, Sumaya, do any of those three feelings require someone to do something to you?
No.
No. So
It's
you're putting stuff.
expressing what's within yourself.
Exactly. You're putting it on yourself, how you feel. You're not blaming anyone. It might very well be that you're being abandoned, but that's not the point at this time. The point is what's happening here. What am I feeling? Let me name these things because we name it to tame it. And sometimes it doesn't need taming, but if you can name it, it's the first step. So you have these feelings, you process it. first thing is emotional recognition. Then emotional processing, going through what it is. How does it feel somatically in your body when you feel sad, when you feel lonely, when you feel alone? There's a feeling in our bodies that we have. Very few people take the time to do that. It does take time. And slowing down is not easy.
So when you, just for our audience, when you say there's a feeling in the body, so would you say that it's taking pause and becoming more aware of where one carries that emotion in the body? For example,
Yeah.
someone might have tense shoulders or like a pain in the stomach.
Right, exactly that.
Mm.
So in other words, like, and there are common patterns. For example, that loneliness, or that may be a type of, midsection feeling, that you might feel a type of jittery, oh my God, am I really alone?
Mm.
I'm always alone, and this is how it feels to be alone. Whereas fear might not be. It might be something else. It might be somewhere else in your body. You have to become, I wouldn't say have to, but it's to me, it's a worthwhile practice to be aware of what's happening in the body during certain feelings and emotions, because they have a physiological expression. We don't need to have high medical degrees to understand that. We all have experienced that. It's why we say, I'm feeling sick in my stomach, or it makes me
The stomach is churning.
churning because I'm so scared about this or so worried. How many of us have had a physiological reaction to an emotion? The first time my parents sent me on a camping trip when I was 5 with I think it was a scouts group or something, I actually vomited before going because I was so excited. So excited. And so that's all that happened. I wasn't scared, but I was very excited. Like, I get to go in tents and eat marshmallows and fire and everything. I was so excited, didn't sleep the whole night. That was my physiological response to excitement at that time. That might not happen now, 40 years later, but we still have to keep, it's wise to be in touch with your body so that you can not let it get ahead of you and do something. It might act in ways that are more reactionary than responsive.
And also that sorry to cut you,
Yes,
that
please go ahead.
when you find this awareness in your body, it almost like unravels it.
Yeah.
Like when you draw attention to it, then it can dissipate.
And just the awareness helps to release the effect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're talking about quote unquote unpleasant feelings. I say quote unquote because they're part of the human experience. Sadness, you mentioned, loneliness, aloneness. We don't search these out. But when they come, we process it, and most of us try to suppress it. And we're taught that. And the more you suppress, I did beginner intermediate studies in homeopathy, and they teach that suppressing some symptoms only make it manifest somewhere else.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much
My
of
example is the two things that are inflammatory for me, and your medical professionals in your audience, those who are going to view this might concur. The more you suppress in my case, asthma with cortisone, then the other things come up that are also inflammatory responses. For me, it was eczema as a child, and even sometimes as a young adult as well. And so one is suppressed, it comes out somewhere else. If you suppress anger, it's not just going to go away. It has to be dealt with. You can suppress it to the point of not committing a crime or a violent action of aggression. But if you don't deal with it, that stays in your body and your physiological response. Maybe you'll get an ulcer. Maybe you'll have
you'll most
liver
certainly
issues.
get sick in some way. It will lead to some kind of
And even in traditional Chinese medicine, that's the seat of your seat of your emotions is liver, actually, anger.
right.
So yeah, all this is related and the way it benefits us in a nonviolent communication lens is be aware of what you're feeling. Be aware of what's happening physiologically. It's not with, okay, what do I do now? What do I do? Forget the what do I do? First, be and acknowledge that this is happening. Then we'll worry about what to do. That's actually way down the NVC path called strategies. It's way later. So this is feelings. I only bring this up to distinguish between feelings and thoughts or perceptions. Abandoned, more a thought perception rather than a feeling. Lonely, alone, you mentioned sad. Those are genuine feelings. That's why the the favorite postmodern word to use, triggered, also is not very accurate in any sense of the word. Triggered. That entails that you are a slave to somebody who can trigger you. In other
You
words,
find the word triggered is unspecific.
It's very general. It's this a ubiquitous term now that people keep using. And I even use it myself sometimes. I catch myself, and what I'm saying is this: hey, what you just said has stimulated me to a point where I'm not feeling the way I was feeling before you did or said what you said or did what you did. And so now if I take a more Viktor Frankl approach to this, I've given you too much power. I've given you too much power that now you can create some discomfort in me. So let me pause between your action or word and my response or reaction. And in between is a space for interpretation. I can reinterpret that such that you have no power over me and that I get to choose my response to your word, your behavior, etc. That is very liberating.
I think it's very, very key to take pause before reacting.
Absolutely. And I speak
reacting.
perhaps,
mm-hmm.
And I speak, as you know, not as an expert in implementing this, but as someone who knows it, because my nature is all, and your viewers may have a few choice words to say about me after this, but I have found myself very reactionary and inclined towards aggression. Yeah, I'm not ashamed of it. This is part of my struggle and my challenge, and my upbringing contributed to it quite a bit. I'm not blaming them, or I'm not blaming my upbringing. One of the first things we learned in the first intensive training I did in nonviolent communication was about this idea of a choiceful pause. And the quote I recall that I actually look at quite often, it's on my office wall, by Gregory Kramer, who said, "When the emotion is strong, let the pause be long." In other words, to use profane modern language, when you're very triggered, take your time. Take your time before you respond. Therefore, it will not, it will less likely be a reaction and more likely be a choiceful response. It's not easy. It's not easy. I want to stress that this stuff is not easy. So that's how we distinguish between feelings and thoughts or perceptions. It's a difficult exercise because you're in the moment, you're feeling these things. The third component of nonviolent communication, this is kind of where the tire meets the road, because it's unique to nonviolent communication, and that is the idea of universal needs. Now, I know you're familiar with universal needs, but for your listeners and viewers, universal needs, let me be as concise as possible. Universal needs are what drives human beings to do things. Usually they're one-word summaries of what we're doing something, saying something, or abstaining from something to meet a particular need. And they're universal in the fact that, you're in Allentown, I'm in Vancouver. From Texas to Timbuktu, these are equally applicable. I'll give you an example. The need for safety. You live in Pennsylvania, I live in British Columbia. Our need for safety is, for the most part, met, right? But would you say that there's anyone on God's green earth that does not have this need for safety? Would you? I'm asking you.
Yeah, it's a universal need.
It's a universal need. Does this mean that everyone, north, south, east, west, has this need met? No.
Oh.
We can think right now in Gaza, in Palestine, in Central Africa, wherever we're talking about, that need might not be entirely met for all the people of the world, but it doesn't mean they don't have it. Similarly, there are lots of different, there's long lists of needs.
Can I mention a
50
few?
is,
Yeah. Okay. Just tell me if these are correct. For example, a need for consideration, for collaboration, for acceptance, for knowledge. Is that one? Just have a need
yeah, for sure. These are all universal needs.
for community, for respect. Could you say for love or no?
That's the trickiest one that is discussed in nonviolent communication circles all over. Is the need for love a need, or is it a feeling?
Ah, okay.
I don't know. I think our Islamic perspective is the most suitable for this, in that it is beyond explanation. It
Okay.
is
So maybe
something.
stay away from the L word for now.
Yeah, and no, and because it starts with us very differently. Love is a love that is vertical for us first. And it may be equally applicable for the Jew and the Christian and other believers. But for us, it certainly is love of God, God's love for us, and then trickling down to simple love for our children, our spouses, etc., etc. It's very different. So that's where nonviolent communication and perhaps traditional religious paradigm may differ in explanation. We can talk about that later, but yes, go ahead with your list.
Maybe like a need for contribution, a need for
Yeah,
purpose, a need for meaning, a
yeah.
need for connection. Anything else?
No, I mean, there's also
I
the
mean, there's a
physical.
list. I can always provide that as a separate link to our.
Absolutely, yeah. The need for intimacy, the need for human touch, the need for the big ones that we can reduce needs to even a handful. Very few people would argue against needs like the need to matter, the need to be seen, the need to be heard. Everyone at some point wants to matter. This has spiritual significance as well for us as believers, but even in a flat secular understanding, we all want to matter to somebody, anybody. One of the worst feelings or judgments we can make of ourselves is we feel, and this is an assessment more than a feeling, insignificant, invisible, right? Therefore, it's not going to be easy to have all these needs met without a spiritual path that is rich. This is why it works well for me, and it will work well for you and perhaps many of your viewers. But all those are valid needs. There's no list. You can't search on Google and do a NVC list of NVC needs. Everybody's compiled a list. I have a list. Other trainers have their own lists, and they categorize them into existential needs, the physical needs, food, nutrition, rest, sleep, recovery, recuperation, etc., etc. The need for fun, the need for play, the need to contribute, you mentioned, the need for creativity, all of these. And the key in NVC is now you can actually name what the need is that you're trying to meet by saying what you're saying.
And that's why I find the needs list so enlightening, is because when you look at it and you realize, oh, that's why I'm feeling this niggly feeling inside, is because I have a need for collaboration. This is why I'm irritated, but you can't name it. So it enables us to be able to name the need.
Yeah. And it's not an easy task. It's not easy. So these are the needs. Now, one of the things that I confused for a long time is we talked about feelings, and they're compared and contrasted with thoughts and perceptions. We talked about observations, compared and contrast with evaluations. Now, what about needs? We all have these needs. Sumaya, you agree with me that we have all these needs that are universal. And we often jump way past the needs to something else. And this is the key distinction for NVC: needs versus strategies.
Okay.
Right. So, Sumaya, you may say, I have a need for nutrition, Jamil. Let's take a break from this damn podcast and talk about meeting this need. And I'm just going to go make myself a little vegan sandwich with vegetables and some other uninteresting things to me. And I may say, oh, wonderful, that's a great way to meet your need. Well, I'm just going to go very lightly grill a steak so it's still red, and put some asparagus on the side, and I'll meet my need for nutrition in my way. You meet your need for food and nutrition in your way. My strategy is steak and veggies. Your strategy may be a tofu sandwich with some vegan mayonnaise or something. I'm not saying that is your strategy, but it might be your strategy. So this is where strategies can differ in order to meet the same needs. So you and I might also, let's say with children, we have this need for connection with our children, let's say. How are you going to do that? I might take my daughter for a hike in the woods here in North Vancouver. You might go do something else with your child, something completely different. It's a different strategy that you're employing from mine, but the need is the same, connection.
Okay.
Where people fight, argue, start wars, embark on divorce proceedings is differing on the strategies, not the need. Do you understand? This is the key element of nonviolent communication, differing about the strategies, not the needs. If we're creative about the strategies and we go the opposite way than what we see outside, first identify the needs that are alive in any given moment, any given interaction, even with ourselves. Then we can explore the plethora of strategies in front of us to meet those needs. That sounds a little bit theoretical and philosophical, but I will pause here because this is the key element of nonviolent communication, just to entertain some questions and queries from you.
Okay, so you've mentioned about the observation. You've mentioned about this is number 2, is it?
3.
Okay, so number 1 is observation. Number 2 was
Feelings.
oh, okay, what I'm
Emotion.
feeling. And then recognizing the need.
Is the third one. Is now we're talking about needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from what I understand in NVC, whoever you are talking to, they are under absolutely no obligation to meet your need. So this is just a mere expression
Yeah.
of need.
They may contribute to your needs. You know, if you have a need that you want to meet, someone else can help you contribute to
Right.
that need being met for you.
Right.
Yeah.
So from what I
Of
understand,
course.
correct me if I'm wrong, is that I have a certain unmet need within me.
Mhm.
Would you be willing to help me fulfill this need? And of course,
Right.
it's entirely up to you to accept or to reject.
I have a need here's a great example for you, and it's a little entertaining for us. So let's say I have a need for connection, for intimacy, for partnership. Well, that's human, isn't it? That's just about everyone on God's green earth. Now, my strategy could be Jessica, could be Layla, could be Khadija, could be Miriam. There's a plethora of strategies out there for me to meet my need. And I can ask, hey, this is a need I have. Would you be willing to help me meet my need in this form of partnership, relationship, etc.? And perhaps I can also meet your need for, or needs, it could be more than that, in the same manner. And then we embark on a contract to say, hey, let's help each other meet this human need that God has put inside us. And that's very authentic to look at it that way. And when you do that, see, we get obsessed with the strategy. No, I do have this need, but I'm obsessed. It has to be Sarah. That's my chosen strategy. If it's not Sarah to meet my needs for intimacy, partnership, relationship, whatever it might be, then I'm not interested. So now we're caught up and stuck on a strategy. And you might, in a very simple base level, talk about food too. And how many of our kids have not done this? I'm hungry. Oh, wonderful. You've identified a feeling inside you. Great. Let's explore how we can meet the need for nutrition and replenish your, meet the need for food, nutrition in a variety of ways. Nope, I only want to have pizza. Okay, so now you're stuck on one strategy. The kid is stuck on one strategy, which is, this is the need I have. I'm naming it. I want you to solve it, dad or mom. And this is the strategy I want you to employ. It's this type of rigidity to the strategy that ends up causing so much, contributing to so much conflict within and with our interactions with other people.
Okay, then how should one approach strategy then?
Once you can identify the need in an interaction with someone else, what needs are alive, you literally name them, identify them, agree that this is what's happening, whether this is by yourself or with someone else, doesn't matter. Now that you can name these needs, look at the array of strategies in front of you in order to meet those needs. Then you get the emotions out of it, in the sense that the attachment, no, I must meet my need according to this particular strategy. No, that then you're too, we would say that that's a type of attachment that is not serving you. You're attached to a particular strategy, not a need, because we all have the needs. When you're attached to a particular strategy, you're saying the only way to meet my need, in other words, to receive this desirable outcome, is by employing this strategy. And if I can employ this strategy, then that's it. I'm going to give up, or I'm going to fight to make sure that this strategy is the only one I use.
So are you saying what, to be more open to varying strategies?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a good way to look at it. I'm not saying one should be open or shouldn't be, because I don't like to get into that moralistic language, especially when we're talking about this. But it seems to be prudent for us to be open to the fact that there are many ways to meet our needs and to help other people meet their needs. And when we're very focused on a particular strategy and a particular path for that only strategy, then we close the door to so much, don't we?
Okay, and then would you say that this is also linked to connection? Because one of the key principles of NVC would be to establish connection. So
Yeah.
it's almost like by being open to various strategies, there's some connection in there, because it's a kind of a collaboration. It's a kind of openness.
And isn't it ironic, and isn't it beautiful? Alhamdulillah. Isn't it beautiful that when you're less attached, you're more connected? That's in and of itself, it's a moment that you can say, it's unexplainable how you can connect well with someone when you're less attached to them. Because when you're less attached to them or the particular outcome that you want, you're so much more open to the person you're interacting with, even if that's yourself. That's where I think, now we're getting into something that I think we have to have another conversation about, which is, to me, the meeting place of nonviolent communication and religion, in particular Islam, the way of surrender, is that they meet at detachment from outcome. NVC invites us to just give it up to whatever needs are alive. And don't be attached to strategy. Our religion says, give it up to your Lord. And everything will be facilitated, capital F, for you. For you. Take it off your shoulders. Remove it. Remove your burdens. And to me, that's a beautiful meeting place. It's such a beautiful meeting place. It lightens our load. It lightens our burden. And you're not walking on God's green earth with so much pain, anguish, and heaviness on your shoulders. We should be able to lift some heavy stuff at times. But when the world is too much, to just let go of the burdens and say, come what may, my needs are taken care of. They will be met. It might not be the strategy I thought was going to be the strategy, but they will be met. Mm-hmm.
So we've done observation, feelings,
yeah,
needs,
Yes.
Number 4 would be what, requests?
So yeah, the final one we'll do, I'll explain, and it's more of a practical one. So we say that request, now that we've identified something, so we've made an observation. Again, this is intra or interpersonal interactions, okay? Secondly, we've identified the feelings that are alive in ourselves and others. Thirdly, we're even aware of the needs that are at play and have manifested for you, yourself, the person you're in interaction with, okay? Now what? Now you have got to the point where that you know what the need is or needs are. And so now you've explored strategies, and now you're almost at the place of choosing a handful or one. And so you say to the person you're working with or talking to or yourself, would you be willing to do this or that, or say this, or not do this and not do that? And why are we so fixed on that sentence structure of would you be willing to?
Because it's allowing them to accept or reject.
And yourself too. It's
And
allowing yourself.
not being demanding.
Right. And then the point of the request, and make sure this is the only part that you need to understand about the nature of a request, is that you're open to no. So the example I give often in workshops with my own kid, I said to I think it was my daughter, okay, would you be willing to go upstairs and brush your teeth now? It's time to go to bed. No. And I immediately, the vein in my neck starts to manifest. I said, what do you mean no? I said, go on up and brush your teeth. Well, then, Dad, why did you say, are you willing to go brush your teeth? Now, what if I don't want to? I don't want to. I said, get on up the stairs before I chase you up the stairs and brush your teeth for you. Then don't say it like that. And they caught me being disingenuous and pretending that there's choice in the matter. What I should have done, again, I'm not condemning myself, but what I could have done is, it's time to brush your teeth and go to bed now. In this house, teeth brushing is not optional. It's not a request. And then I can reinforce the fact that you're being commanded right now. Now, obviously, that's not going to bring as much connection as a request, because the request entails they can say no. But because I know that they can say no, I'm going to remove this ridiculous aspect of polite requests that are actually demands disguised in highbrow language. Throw that out. We're asking an NVC to throw that out and be real, be authentic, and make your requests bold, but be open to no. How many times have you been requested by someone to do something or not? And then you say, thanks, I appreciate your request. My response to your request is no. And then there's a fiery response. Hey, wait a sec, didn't I ask nicely? I don't care if you asked nicely. You asked, and they're in the way of you asking, that entailed I have choice. And so just because you don't like the answer I offer you, don't, that's my answer to you, and I'm in choice. Your doctor may ask you to take this medication or that medication or this injection or the other, and you tell them, no, thanks for the offer, I'm not interested. And then if they're NVC aware, they will be aware of your sovereignty, autonomy, your place of choice. And that's rich to offer that to people and to feel it too. And we often stomp our feet when we feel that it's a demand clothed in the language of a request. So that's all this last step is, making requests of ourselves and the person or people we're interacting with.
Okay. Before we move on from the requests, is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Because okay.
Not much. I just,
Okay.
this is where autonomy, sovereignty, and the freedom, it's a big need for a lot of people. Freedom. This is where it comes in, requests versus demands.
Okay, because what I'm interested in doing is, since we absolutely have to have a follow-up conversation, since we have not covered even half of the stuff I wanted to today, I was just thinking, would it be possible for us to create some kind of demo so that, and either you could use an example from Rosenberg's book, or you could But what I would be interested to see is a particular discussion that might ensue between ex-spouses, between a parent and a child, just something that would be very relevant to our community. And either you could do it by yourself, or I could help demo it so that they can see the flow.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
So we will be doing a demo, certain demos of NVC scenarios in our follow-up interview and discussion. So for now, we'll be closing. Thank you very much, Jamil, for your time. That is quite enlightening.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Okay, so we'll be following up with you shortly, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.